Hello. In this recording we will be looking at overheads and the use of departmental rates to calculate overhead absorption rates. Different absorption rates can be calculated for each department depending on the nature of the work performed in that department. It's a more reliable basis for absorbing overheads compared with blanket rates, since the nature of each department and the cause of overheads is taken into consideration. So for example, Department A may use machines, and so we could calculate an overhead absorption rate based on machine hours, whereas Department B could be very labour intensive, and so a labour overhead absorption rate would be more appropriate. So it allows us to calculate individual departmental rates. In order to do this, we need to know what the overheads are for the individual departments. Some of the overheads can be allocated to particular departments because we recognise the department that has incurred the overhead. Other overheads may relate to all of the departments, such as rent. If we receive an invoice for rent for the month, it will relate to rent of the whole building, and so we need to find a way of apportioning that amount across the individual departments. So the steps we need to go through is step 1 to identify the total overhead cost for the business. Then step 2 is to allocate or apportion the overheads. Step 3 is to reapportion any service centre overheads. Step 4, calculate the overhead absorption rate for each department. And step 5, calculate the overheads absorbed per product. So we'll look at an example. So a business produces 2 products including the XR12 and is expected to incur the following overhead costs in the next period. So it's telling us that these are budgeted figures because they relate to the next accounting period, and they've also used the word expected. So we have the overheads for the period, £43,000. They've told us that there are 4 departments: machining, packing, stores and admin. And then they have given us some additional information about those departments. They've given us the floor area, so the size of each of the departments. They've told us how many machine hours are worked in the departments. Now stores and admin have no machine hours, so that tells us that there are no machines in those departments. It's told us the labour hours for each department. It's given us the store's requisitions. A requisition is a request. So 320 stores requisitions by machining tells you that in the period it is expected that the machining department would make 320 requests to the stores for the stores to issue material. And the packing department would make 120 requests to the stores to issue material. And finally we're told the admin time utilised. We're then told how long it takes to produce just one XR2. The XR12, not XR2. The XR12 takes 5 machine hours and 3 labour hours in the machining department. And then it takes 1 machine hour and 2 labour hours in the packing. So the product starts off in machining. It's machined for 5 hours. Then an employee spends 3 labour hours working on that product. At that point, it is moved into the packing department, where there is 1 hour spent on machines, and then an employee spends another 2 hours working on the product, and then the product will be complete. So we need to calculate the overhead to be absorbed by each unit of the XR12. But we're going to be calculating departmental rates, not a single blanket rate. So step number 1 is to identify the total overhead costs. So we know what they are, 43,000. Step 2, allocate or apportion the overheads between the departments. To do this, we draw up what is called an overhead analysis. And I have an example. This is an overhead analysis sheet. The first column lists the individual overheads. And we'll come to the reapportioning section shortly. Then we have a column headed up basis, and this is the basis that we use to apportion the overheads across the departments. Then we have the 4 departments that we were told about, and in the final column we have the total overhead. So the machine power total was £4,000. Now what we need to do is, using the information that we have, we need to try and either allocate or apportion these overheads to the departments. The first overhead that we have is machine power, which is £4,000. So we're going to look back at the information we were given in the example and see what information is relevant to machines. So in the information we have machine hours. And we're looking for a cause of the overheads. So if we've spent £4,000 on powering up the machines, then we can assume that that is because the machines have been running for a total of 25,000 hours. So that machine power figure has been caused by the number of machine hours that the machines have been running for. So our basis for apportioning is machine hours. The calculation that we're going to do is we will take the total machine overhead, £4,000. We will divide it by the total number of machine hours, and we will then multiply it by the machine hours in each department. So multiply it by 20,000, and that tells us how much of the £4,000 relates to the machining department. Then we do the same thing again. £4,000 in overhead divided by total machine hours. Multiply it by the machine hours in the packing department. So that £4,000 of overhead has been apportioned between the 2 departments, machining and packing, based on the number of machine hours that are operated in each of those departments. So we can now put those figures into the overhead analysis sheet. So we've got 3,200 and 800. And in the basis column we write machine hours. Now always make a check. 3,200 plus 800 gives us 4,000, so we've done it correctly. Second overhead, heat and light. So the overhead is £2,000 for heat and light. We look at the information given, and as a general rule, heat and light is apportioned based on floor area, because the bigger the floor area, the more heating and lighting it will cost. So if we look at floor area, it's a total of 5,000. So £2,000 overhead, divide it by 5,000 and then multiply it by the floor area in each of the departments. So we're going to multiply by 2,500. We're going to do the calculation again and multiply it by 1,500, which is the packing department figure. Repeat it again for stores. That equals 200 and £2,000 of overheads divided by 5,000 and multiplied by the floor area of admin, £200. So we have apportioned £2,000 of factory heat and light across the 4 departments based on floor area. So I'm now going to put those figures into the overhead analysis. So it's £1,000 for machining, it was £600 for packing, £200 for stores, £200 for admin, and the basis we used floor area. So the next overhead, machine setup costs of £23,000. So let's look back at the information that we have, and what we have relating to machines is the machine hours. So our setup costs are going to be caused by the machine hours. So we're going to use that one again. So we have £23,000 of setup costs. We'll divide by the total machine hours, and then we'll multiply by the machine hours in each department. So we'll multiply it by 20,000 for the machining department, and times 5,000 gives us the packing figure. So if I put that one into the analysis, we had 18,400 and 4,600, and the basis machine hours. Next we come to invoicing costs. So the invoicing costs are £3,000. Now the invoicing costs were incurred by a particular department. So whereas with the other overheads we've apportioned them because they relate to more than one department, with invoicing costs, the department that would be doing the invoicing is the admin department. So the whole invoicing cost should be allocated to admin. So we don't need to apportion it because it hasn't been caused by any of the other departments. It all belongs to admin. And in the basis we write allocate. Next we come to the material handling costs. And again we can allocate that. The only department that would actually be handling the material is the stores department. So we can allocate to stores. And finally, the dispatch costs. Again, the department that will be getting the goods ready for dispatch is the packing department, because that's what they do. Pack the goods for dispatch. So we can allocate. So that's all our overheads, either allocated or apportioned. So now we total up each column. So total the machining column. Total the packing column, total the stores, and total admin. And do a final cross check. 22,600 plus 15,000 plus 2,200 plus 3,200 should come to £43,000. So that's the apportioning. Now step 3, if we go back up, talked about reapportioning from service departments to production related departments. This is the secondary apportionment. Now what this means is that we are going to look at each of our departments and decide whether they are actually a production department, so they are involved in the production of the product, or whether they are a service department, which means that they don't actually produce the product, but they're needed for the running of the business. So the machining and the packing we know are production departments. At the start of the example we were told that the products spent time in each of these departments being machined and having some labour work done. The stores doesn't actually produce the product, but provides the materials for the production departments. And the admin department doesn't produce the product, but it provides the service in terms of the paperwork for the final product. So what we have are that machining and packing are production departments, and stores and admin are known as service centres. Now we need to work out an overhead absorption rate for our production departments only, not the service centres. But there are currently some overheads on the service centres. We've got £2,200 worth of overheads apportioned to stores and £3,200 apportioned to admin. So we need to reapportion these two figures. So we're going to start off with the admin figure. So we're going to take 3,200 away from admin, and that will bring that down to 0. But where are we going to put that admin figure? Let's go back up and look at the information we've been given. Admin time utilised. The machining department utilised admin for 200 hours. Packing utilised admin, and stores utilised admin. So we're going to apportion the admin figure across those three departments using admin time. So same method as before. Just go back. That admin figure So if we look at the calculation, £3,200 of admin divided by total admin time, 1,000, and then we will multiply it by 200 to give us the admin time for machining. Then 3,200 divided by 1,000 times 500 gives us the packing figure, and 3,200 divided by 1,000 times 300 gives us the stores figure. So we can put those into the overhead analysis. So we're reapportioning the admin. We're putting £640 to machining, £1,600 to packing, £960 to stores. So we total again. So that's 23,240. This is 16,600. This is 3,160. And our admin, we know, is down to 0. Need to make sure we put the basis in. So this was on admin time. So that's admin dealt with. Now we need to do the same with stores, because stores is also a service centre. So 3,160 is going to be taken off the stores, making that 0. And we need to look at where we're going to apportion it to. So we need some information about stores. Back up to the example. And we have stores requisitions. If you remember, I said a requisition was a request. So a number of requests have been made to the stores, a total of 440. 320 were made by machining and 120 by packing. So we again do the calculation. We take the stores figure, and notice we've taken the final stores figure, 3,160, divided by the total number of stores requisitions, 440, and multiply it by the stores requisitions by machining, which was 320, gives us 2,298, and then 3,160, divide it by the total and multiply it by 120 requisitions for the packing. Gives us 862. So now these can go into our analysis sheet. 2298 for machining, 862 for packing, stores we've got rid of, total, and if we check, this still comes to £43,000. So we've managed to allocate and apportion our overheads to the production departments, so to machining and packing. Generally, you will be told which departments are the production departments and which departments are the service centres. So once you've done your initial allocation and apportionment, you do need to look at what overheads you have on your service centres and then go through the process of reapportioning those. So we've almost finished. Let's go back up and have a look at what we were required to do. We need to calculate the overhead to be absorbed. If we look at the steps, we've done step 1, we've done step 2, we've done step 3. So now step 4 is to calculate the overhead absorption rate, and step 5, the overhead to be absorbed. So it's an overhead absorption rate per department, and it's per production department. So our overhead absorption rate. Calculate an overhead absorption rate. We take budgeted overhead. So let's look at machining. Budgeted overhead 25538, and we divide it by budgeted activity, and that can be machine hours or labour hours or some other method. So we need to look at the information that we have. Now, given that this is the machining department, it would make sense to use the machine hours. We have 20,000 machine hours in the machining department. You'll see there is also a figure for labour hours, and we can absorb based on labour hours, but the general rule is that we use whichever figure is the higher, machine or labour hours, since that indicates which is the most intensive. So since the machine hours is higher than the labour hours, we're going to absorb on machine hours. So the overhead absorption rate will be the overhead divided by 20,000 machine hours. Which equals £1.28 per machine hour. Now we look at packing. The overhead 17462. Divide by, we can divide by labour hours or machine hours. What information have we got? Well, we have both. We have a machine hour figure and we have a labour hour figure, but the higher figure is the labour hours, so we will use that. So dividing by 7,000, and that gives us £2.49 per labour hour. So that is the overhead absorption rates calculated. The very last thing we need to do, step 5, is to work out how much overhead will be absorbed by each product. So we have two overhead absorption rates. For the machining department it is per machine hour, and for the labour department, sorry, for the stores, no, it's packing. For the packing department it is per labour hour. So final time, back up to the example. Now this is where it can get confusing. What we're told is the XR12 is expected to take 5 machine hours and 3 labour hours in the machining department, and then 1 machine hour and 2 labour hours in the packing department. So which of those figures do we use? Well, that's why it is so important to always write after your overhead absorption rate per and then the basis. So for the machining department, our absorption rate is per machine hour. So we're going to multiply that £1.28 by the machine hours, and we're going to ignore the labour hour figure. So how many machine hours was it? So in the machining department, it's 5 machine hours. Five machine hours times £1.28. In the packing, our absorption rate is labour hour. So we need to know the number of labour hours in the packing department for just one product. And there we have it, 2 labour hours. So 2 labour hours times 2.49 gives us £4.98. So the overhead absorbed, £11.38. So for every unit of XR12 that is produced, in addition to the prime cost, so the direct material, the direct labour and the direct expenses, we will add £11.38 to cover the overheads. And that's the 5th and final step, and brings us to the end of this recording.